We're back with another news video here today. We have some more news from the NHL waiver wire. We have a bunch of signings that took place on the deadline day, as well as some rumors for things that were close and discussed, but never actually happened. We'll discuss the details of everything coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As we can see, I'm still on location here. I'm going to set up, for those of you who may have missed a video too, I'm going to be in Florida for the next week, so certainly why you're seeing videos here from a different recording area, so keep that in mind for future. Obviously here for today, trade deadline day, we had lots of trade activity. We're all caught up on videos on the channel going over all the different deals, but we do have some other news to discuss here today. We had 3 players on waivers yesterday. They are all cleared, so they can all be reassigned. No waiver wire claims at all. Nothing new on that front here for today, but we did have some signings to discuss. We had a few other deals. We had the Washington Capitals have extended for Nicholas Aube-Kubel, who they picked up on waivers. Of course, he was originally signed by the Maple Leafs last offseason, became expendable, I guess, on their opinion, was put on waivers, picked up by Washington. They've been pleased. So he gets a 1-year contract extension at $1.2 million. So obviously the Capitals have been retooling, you could say. They've sold off some pieces. They've moved Orlov and Hathaway, Johansson, others. They've extended a few players too, including Aube-Kubel, Jensen, etc. So certainly, a different look we're likely to see from Washington next year. Moving on, but we also seen the Red Wings announced that they've signed veteran NHL forward Alex Shea, who was not yet in the NHL this season. He gets a prorated 1-year contract for the rest of this year in the NHL at $750,000. So Chasson's bounced around a lot of short-term deals the last few years, wasn't able to get signed into the offseason. So here we are. We'll see if he can make the most of his opportunities. Certainly with some deals we've seen the Red Wings make leading into the deadline, moving on a few players like Bertuzzi, for example. Certainly create a little bit of flexibility in the cap, and also, some roster spots. So they move him in to see what he can do here for the rest of the year. The Nashville Predators have also extended defenseman Dante Fabro at a 1-year contract at $2.5 million. There was also some speculation that Fabro might be dealt. I know Elliot Friedman and a few other reporters had mentioned there was some talk that he might be expendable or a trade piece for Nashville. Nashville certainly went into a bit of a retool mode here as well. They've sold off some pieces and trying to get a little bit younger, get some more picks in their organization for future. As we see David Poile get ready to retire and hand things over to Barry Trotz. So trying to stock the cupboards a little bit on the the prospecting younger side of things. Fabro's still a younger defenseman, but fair to say probably hasn't quite turned out to be as the higher end defenseman they thought and hoped they were getting when he was drafted, at least not yet. So we'll see what happens with Fabro. Gets a 1-year deal at $2.5 million. Certainly not a bad contract, so they could still consider possibly moving him down the road. Now, looking at some teams and what they did and did not do, certainly there's still some trade rumors and some speculation about some things out there that was talked about and never happened. For example, Montreal. Montreal Canadiens had a fairly quiet day, a fairly quiet number of days really leading into it. They ended up becoming a broker as a third party on the Nick Bonino trade to Pittsburgh to get an extra draft pick in their system for retaining a small amount of salary for the rest of the year, so not a big deal there. But they had a lot of veteran contracts that they were not able to move. Sean Monahan, who started off really strong for Montreal, a lot of people were convinced, oh, this guy could play again, he's healthy, he's back. Maybe not the same Sean Monahan he was 3 or 4 years ago when he was a 30-goal scorer, but he was still a very capable player, somebody who could probably produce in a middle six role. They didn't get hurt early on. He's been out for quite some time. And then we learned more today from Ken Hughes saying that he actually suffered another injury while he was rehabbing. This is why it's kept him out so long. So there's multiple things going on. So obviously teams shied away from him given the injury history that he had before, where he's at now. And, I'm not sure what to do. They might sign him to a 1-year contract extension, see if he can get into next year a little healthier, better luck, and maybe flip him next year. But I certainly think they picked him up from the Flames with the hopes of trading him for something further. I mean, if he wants to stay in Montreal, I would think they would try to do that just for asset management purposes. I'm not sure he's a fit there long term, but we'll see. I mean, Jonathan Drouin was not able to be dealt. Mike Hoffman, Armia, other veteran guys that were certainly, rumored to have some action around them, but never materialized. So it's unfortunate the Habs are going to end up losing some players really that they want to. I mean, because it's mutual. I don't think there's any desire to re-sign Jonathan Drouin. Obviously Hoffman sells a little bit of term. Joel Edmondson's another player was speculated again that they were going to get a good offer. Never came. So just, in Montreal's case, there was lots of players there that wanted, probably wanted to get into a playoff role for themselves for the further their careers. And at the same time, I'm sure that the Habs would like to have moved on to get an asset back so they can either move on from a player that's not going to be re-signed or get out of a little bit of term and contract. And it just never came to be. So to me, that's been unfortunate, but we didn't expect it to be a huge deadline. It's not like years past, but certainly, Montreal didn't have a very eventful day, and that's kind of unfortunate. There was some talk around the Philadelphia Flyers. One rumor was that JVR was being traded, although the rumors around him all day was that the activity was not decent, but not a lot of real solid firmer activity. there was some talk that teams like Vegas, Seattle, Winnipeg were all mentioned. I think maybe Calgary, but I think that had kind of gone away earlier. And then eventually we started hearing that this team was out, this team was out, this team was out. And then it came up to be that he's going to Detroit. We're like, JVR to Detroit. Elliot Friedman put out there, and he didn't have it confirmed. He said he's hearing that JVR might be being traded to Detroit. And I'm like, why would Detroit want James Van Riemsdyk? Like, no offense, JVR. Like, I still think you're, a decent player. He has struggled recently. But like with what Detroit's doing, Detroit clearly went off into a bit of a retool. Like, they're rebuilding. They're still rebuilding. But they've decided to sell off some veteran guys that have been around there. Not even like older veterans, but like, guys that are getting closer to UFA status, but not quite, like, Tyler Bertuzzi, Philip Hronek. Like, they're still, players with a decent amount of experience, but they're not old. Like, still in their mid-20s, right? So when you're selling guys like that off, why would you want to turn around and bring in a veteran guy on an expiring contract? It doesn't make sense. I mean, will the Eiserman still expect his Red Wings to push for the playoffs this year? I think so. But he even said today himself that he feels that the Sabres and the Senators are both ahead of them in the rebuilding process. And, based on what we saw earlier in the year, we thought maybe it was looking more like Detroit might be the team that's furthest ahead. It doesn't look like that anymore. Like, they really took some steps back here in recent weeks. And they're not out of it by any means, but the Sabres and Senators continue to get stronger as the year goes on, and they've kind of weakened a bit. And we've seen, like, the last couple of games when they did it back-to-back in Ottawa, it just wasn't even close, right? Wasn't close at all. Like, Ottawa completely destroyed them 2 games in a row. And I'm not saying they ruined their season, but certainly after things went into sell-off mode right after that. But, it's unfortunate. It just doesn't make sense to me why Detroit would want James Van Riemsdyk. But that was one rumor that was out there. But apparently it was contingent on Detroit moving another player, and that apparently ran out of time, never happened. I'm not sure what happened or what the deal was, but it never got to be. So the JVR deal from Philly to Detroit was off the table now. So he didn't get traded. So to me, that's a massive L, big loss for the Flyers and GM Chuck Fletcher. Bad asset management. I don't know how they couldn't move him. They managed to move Zach McEwen for Brendan Lemieux. Not really sure. It's not much of an upgrade, but, at the end of the day, it's just, I don't know. The Flyers are a mess. The Canucks are also in a mess as well. Lots of rumblings about Brock Besser and JT Miller. Brock Besser, I can understand contract for what he's providing for stats right now. It's tough, right? I mean, there's still teams like Minnesota very interested. It's just tough for them to work it out, and I'm not sure he's going to get to Minnesota eventually. But I understand why Besser didn't move. But there were reports that the Canucks had an offer, legit offer, on JT Miller. Now, I know the Vancouver Canucks, I believe they denied this, but you can't believe what teams are not going to come out and tell you the truth on what conversations they had, what they didn't have, and what was closed. Like, it's just not going to happen. Like, sometimes you hear confirmations about, but once those GMs or coaches or whoever has the intel are out of the role, they can talk more freely down the road in the future. Sometimes you hear things, but at the end of the day, there was the reporters that are reporting this are pretty reputable and convinced that the Canucks had an offer for Miller, but it was all futures-based draft picks. Now, I don't know if they expected the Canucks to retain any money. That might have been an issue. But the fact that, they apparently turned down the offer and said, we can't accept this. As much as we like the offer, we can't do it because we would need a player, like a roster player included, coming back who could be a centerman for us. Like, maybe obviously a cheaper contract perhaps, or maybe a younger player, but they would absolutely insist on there being a roster player to somehow replace him, maybe at a cheaper level, different kind of player or whatever. And like really, like this Canucks management, and well, likely due to ownership, which is what I think, just absolutely refuse to go through a rebuild here. Now, to me, you can rebuild quickly if you do it right, but the fact that they lost an opportunity to trade Miller for picks, and they could have got some good prospects out of it with those picks, especially if there was a first-round pick in 23 included, like that's just crazy. I'm shocked to hear that they had an offer like that and would have rejected it. Maybe we'll talk about that a little further in another video, trying to get more information on the scenario to see what war was offered, what teams, get an idea what might have been on the table there. But still, that's certainly concerning. There are certainly rumors, too, about Winnipeg Jets defenseman Logan Stanley possibly wanting a trade and requesting it, or at least making it known he'd welcome it. I'm not sure what level, what degree things are at. There's speculation that Logan Stanley is unhappy with the way he's been utilized this year, and would like a fresh start and get moved somewhere else. Kevin Cheveldayoff, like all GMs, pretty much spoke to most GMs. I haven't had a chance to follow every 32 teams all just yet here, because it's obviously it's 32 press conferences to listen to. But I know that most GMs, I've seen bits and pieces of speaking to the media after the deadline passed today, and Chevy did not confirm or deny that the Stanley trade request is a thing. But certainly, there's lots of speculation that he's very not happy. Now, so we'll see if that could develop into something for after the season as well. The Maple Leafs, I know, were quiet today too. They were certainly not expected to do much more. There were some rumblings. Maybe you might see one little small move. Wasn't much. They did trade Dryden Hunt today, which minor league move basically. But they left themselves with exactly enough space. They can technically activate Matt Murray from LTIR, and I've seen reports that he may play tomorrow night, which would be first time in a while that he's been back. And they still would have enough wiggle room there to sign Matthew Knies if he decides to come out of college and sign with the Leafs finally at the end of his college season, near the end of the regular season in the NHL. They could do that as well. So they could add themselves another potential playoff weapon. Like the team's deep enough with what they've built. But yeah, another possibility on that front here as well. So there's lots of talk, lots of speculation about lots of things that never materialize. So stay tuned for that. We're going to be doing a video. I'm probably going to get it up to the channel probably within the next 24 hours or so. I just need a little time to do some analyzing. But we're going to do like a trade deadline. I do this every year. Trade deadline winners and losers. Take a look at which teams I thought made some really good moves to improve their clubs for now or the future, because there's different ways to win here, right? You can win by making big additions to load up for the playoffs. You can win by selling off pieces if it makes sense. That's the right thing for your team to do, and getting a bunch of future assets that are good for your team that way. And then there's some teams I'm going to classify as the losers of the day, which essentially either failed to do moves that I thought were imperative to have playoff success, or did not get good returns, or just whatever. I just thought they didn't have a good day or a good, well, in this case, the deadline really wasn't a day. The deadline was the better part of a week or more, with lots of activity here in the last 7, 8, 9 days. This feels like it's been trade deadline for like a long time here. Like, it's been absolutely nuts how this deadline has gone. I believe we ended up a total, I think, 18 or 19 trades, which in grand scheme of things, looking back at some of the more recent trade deadlines, actually isn't too bad considering all the activity leading up to it. If you add it all up, though, I think it has to be one of the crazier, busier deadlines in recent years for sure. We even seen brothers traded for themselves between Nick and Brett Ritchie being all in the same deal, which is, I believe, like I said in that video, first time in NHL history, at least to the best of my knowledge. If that's anybody has anything else to show that's not right, let me know. But I'm pretty sure that's the only time that's ever happened. Otherwise, we got a lot of news today, lots of speculation. There still will be trade rumor type videos coming to the channel, because obviously there's going to be lots of talk now about all the things that didn't happen and what we might see in the offseason. Because really, if you think about it, you're going to have a couple of months leading up to the next time we're going to see a lot of trade activity will be around the draft, and as teams' regular seasons don't make the playoffs come to an end as well. So let me know your thoughts on all of today's news down in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe, stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.